In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make this model of a fork. In the View menu, change the view from perspective to orthogonal. In the View menu, change the view to the front view. Now I'm switching to a file I made earlier, and this is the first outline I drew, but it gave a pretty good model, so I'm going to use it for reference. And it's roughly 7 blender units above the origin and 7 blender units below the origin. Switching back, I'm going to select the lamp, press G to grab, and move that so it's 7 grid blocks above the origin, and use that as a guide point. Select the cube and go into edit mode. Because a fork is symmetrical, I'm going to scroll down and turn X mirror on. Scrolling back up, I'm going to click the delete button and delete the vertices of the cube. I'm going to drag on the boundary of the 3D view window to make it bigger, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Looking at my original outline, the first vertex is 7 grid blocks down. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and to insert a vertex, hold down the control key and left click. I don't want the blue and the red arrow of the 3D manipulator widget, so I'm going to turn that off. Hold down the control key and left click for the next vertex. Hold down the control key and left click. Looking at the original outline, the next vertex spans roughly 2 grid blocks, the vertex after that roughly 3, and the vertex after that roughly 1. Switching back, count 2 blocks up, hold down control and left click to insert a vertex. Count 3 blocks up, hold down control and left click to insert a vertex. Go roughly 1 block up, hold down control and insert a vertex. Switching, the next 3 vertex points form this curve here. Notice that the second vertex is at a grid point. Switching back, hold down control and left click. The grid point, hold down control and left click. Hold down control and left click. Switching, the next 3 points form the tip of one of the prongs of the fork, and they are approximately 3 grid blocks up. Switching back, count 3 blocks up, and on the vertical grid line, hold down control and left click. Hold down control and left click. Hold down control and left click. Switching, the next set of points form the base of the 2 prongs and span about half a grid block wide. Switching back, I'm going to pan down, hold down shift and drag with the middle mouse button and zoom in with the mouse wheel. Count 3 blocks down, 1, 2, 3, and about half a block in. Hold down control and left click. Hold down control and left click. Hold down control and left click. I've only put 3 points in, but I will add the 4th point later. Switching, the remaining points finish off the second prong. Notice that the prong is just over half a grid block wide. Switching back, I'm going to put my first point about here, control left click, control left click. The next point is just under half a grid block across, control left click. The next point just over half a grid block across, and the final point there. I'm going to tidy up the ends of the fork. Hold down shift and drag with the middle mouse button to pan to the center. Zoom in with the mouse wheel. Select a vertex, G to grab and move it to a point on the grid. Select the opposite vertex, G to grab and move that to a point on the grid 4 squares across. Select the point, G to grab and move that to a point on the grid 1 square across, 2 squares up. Hold down shift, select both vertices, click subdivide, select the new vertex, G to grab and put that to a point on the grid 1 across, 2 up. Press B for B select, select all 4 points. In the mesh menu, snap, selection to grid, squares that off. Do the same for the other end. Select the vertex, G to grab, move that to a grid point. Select the vertex, G to grab, move that 4 squares across. Select the point, G to grab, move that 1 square across, 2 squares up, hold down shift, select 2 vertices, click subdivide, select the new vertex, G to grab, put that 1 square across, 2 up, B for B select, select all 4 points, and mesh, snap, snap selection to grid. Zoom back with the mouse wheel, hold down shift, middle mouse button to pan, zoom in with the mouse wheel, select a vertex, G to grab, move that to a grid point, select a vertex, G to grab, move that to a grid point 4 apart, select the point, G to grab, 1 across, 2 down, hold down shift, select 2 vertices, subdivide, select the new vertex, G to grab, put that on the grid, B for B select, select all 4, mesh, snap, selection to grid, shift middle mouse button to pan, select the vertex, G to grab, move it to a grid point, select the vertex, G to grab, move that 1 across, 2 down, hold down shift, select 2 vertices, mesh, snap, selection to grid. The blue line is the z-axis and it is the axis of symmetry. The black line is from the lamp. If you look at the base of these 2 prongs, if the blue line came down through the middle of it, the vertices would be 1 grid block away from it. So we need to move the whole of the fork outline 1 grid block away from the blue axis. I'm going to press A twice to select all, G to grab, X for the X direction and move that over. While everything is selected and while we're at this resolution, I'm going to snap everything to the grid. Notice the shortcut key is Shift S. At this point I've finished the outline of the fork and I'm going to call that the end of part 1 of this tutorial. In part 2 of the tutorial I will fill the outline and extrude it to make the fork. So see you in part 2.